My 18th birthday was supposed to mark the beginning of my adult independence. Instead, it became the day my stepfather, Robert, decided to show his true colors. We were having dinner, my mom, Sarah, looking uncomfortable as Robert cleared his throat and announced that now I was legally an adult, I needed to start paying $800 in monthly rent. Little did he know that the house he was demanding money for actually belonged to me thanks to my late father's careful planning. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my power-hungry stepdad, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated you. I grew up in a loving home with two parents who genuinely cared for me. My dad was a successful real estate developer with a knack for smart investments and long-term planning. He always told me, Alan, the most valuable things in life are relationships and a secure foundation. He meant that both literally and figuratively. Our family home was his pride and joy, a beautiful two-story colonial with a wraparound porch in a quiet neighborhood with excellent schools. My childhood was filled with backyard barbecues, camping trips, and weekend projects with my dad. He taught me about basic home repairs, saying a man should know how to maintain his investments. I did not fully understand then that he was preparing me for a future he might not be part of. When I was 12, everything changed. My dad was driving home from a business meeting when a drunk driver crossed the center line. The police said he died instantly. I still remember my mom collapsing when the officers came to our door and the numbing shock that followed. The funeral was a blur of faces and condolences that meant nothing to me. All I knew was that my hero was gone. The following months were incredibly difficult. My mom tried to stay strong for me, but I often heard her crying at night. She took extended leave from her job as an elementary school teacher, and we lived in a fog of grief. During this time, men in suits would come to our house, speaking with my mom about papers accounts and trust funds. I was vaguely aware that my dad had left everything in order, but at 12, I did not care about financial matters. Mr. Harrison, my father's attorney and longtime friend, visited most frequently. He always made a point to talk to me, directly asking about school and my interests, never treating me like a clueless kid. Once when my mom was making coffee, he told me, "Your father made sure you would always be taken care of, Alan. When you are older, we will have some important conversations." By the time I turned 14, my mom had returned to teaching and seemed to be emerging from her deepest grief. That was when she met Robert at a school fundraising event. He was a new administrator in the district, recently moved from another state. Tall with salt and pepper hair, and an easy smile, he charmed everyone, especially my mom. Their relationship developed quickly. Robert was attentive and thoughtful, bringing flowers and taking my mom to nice restaurants. He made efforts with me too, asking about my interests and bringing me books about architecture when I mentioned I might want to follow in my dad's footsteps. Still, something about him made me uneasy. My first real concern came when he started asking casual questions about our financial situation. "Your dad must have left you too well provided for," he commented once, his tone too interested. "This house must be worth quite a bit now." My mom, still vulnerable and clearly smitten, did not seem to notice the red flags. Within 8 months of meeting, they were engaged. I tried to be supportive because she seemed happier than she had been since Dad died, but I could not shake my reservations. They married in a small ceremony when I was 15. Almost immediately, Robert moved into our home, and his true personality began to emerge. The thoughtful gestures for my mom became less frequent. His casual questions about money became more pointed. He started commenting on every purchase my mom made, questioning whether we really needed new clothes or if I really needed to attend academic summer camps. My mom, perhaps afraid of returning to loneliness, made excuses for him. "Robert is just practical about money, Alan. It is good to have someone looking after our finances." But I noticed other changes too. Robert rearranged the furniture, replacing some of my dad's things with his own. He converted Dad's home office into his man cave, boxing up the remaining photos and mementos. My mom said nothing as our home slowly transformed to reflect Robert's preferences. Around this time, I received a letter asking me to meet with Mr. Harrison. My mom was surprised but did not object when I said I wanted to go alone. In his wood-paneled office, Mr. Harrison explained that my father had established regular check-ins with me as part of his estate plan. "Your father was exceptionally thorough, Alan," he said. "He wanted me to start explaining certain aspects of his arrangements as you got older. He spoke about a trust fund for my college education that would become accessible when I turned 18. He mentioned investments that were growing steadily. When I asked about our house, he became particularly careful with his words. Your father made special arrangements for the family home," he said. "Everything is protected as your father wished. When you turn 18, we will have a more detailed conversation about this." I left with more questions than answers, but feeling reassured that my father was still looking out for us. At home, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Robert complained about carrying the financial burden of our household, despite my mom's teaching salary. He made comments about my privileged upbringing and how I needed to learn the value of hard work. I took a part-time job at a local hardware store, partly to escape the house, and partly to have my own money that Robert could not control. My mom became quieter, more acquiescent to Robert's demands. She stopped buying things for herself and apologized profusely when she needed to replace something essential. I noticed she had stopped having lunch with her teacher friends and called her sister less frequently. Robert always seemed to be looking over her shoulder when she checked emails or paid bills. I retreated into academics and extracurricular activities, staying at school as late as possible. My grades were excellent, and I secured several scholarship offers for college. Robert took credit for this, claiming his firm guidance had instilled discipline in me. As my 18th birthday approached, Robert made increasingly frequent comments about adult responsibilities and paying your own way in the world. I suspected something was coming, but focused on finishing high school strong. I was set to graduate in the top 5 of my class, and despite the tension at home, I felt optimistic about my future. The day I turned 18 started normally enough. It was a Friday, and I went to school, wearing the watch that had been my dad's, which Mr. Harrison had given me on my 16th birthday. "Your father wanted you to have this when you were old enough to appreciate it," he had said. I wore it every day, a connection to the man who still shaped my life, despite his absence. My mom had prepared my favorite breakfast chocolate chip pancakes and given me a card with a heartfelt message about how proud she was of the young man I had become. Robert had merely grunted and commented that 18 did not look much different from 17. That evening, my mom made a special dinner lasagna from scratch. Robert, who had been unusually quiet all day, waited until we were eating before clearing his throat dramatically. "Now that you are officially an adult, Alan," he said, his tone falsely reasonable, "we need to discuss your contributions to this household." My mom froze fork halfway to her mouth. I noticed she would not meet my eyes. What kind of contributions, I asked, though. I already suspected what was coming. Robert smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Rent, of course. $800 monthly, starting now. That is less than you would pay for a room anywhere else, so I am being quite generous." I carefully placed my fork down. "I am still in high school for another month." "But you are legally an adult," he countered smoothly. "Adults pay their way. You have that job at the hardware store, and I know you have been saving money. Consider this your introduction to the real world." I glanced at my mom, who was staring at her plate. Her silence told me everything I needed to know about where she stood, or rather how afraid she was to stand anywhere. "I will need to think about this," I said, finally keeping my voice neutral despite the anger building inside me. "There is nothing to think about." Robert snapped, his facade cracking slightly. "This is not a negotiation. $800 due on the 1st of each month starting June 1st. I excused myself from the table, claiming I needed to study for a final exam. In my room, I locked the door and pulled out the folder of documents my father had left me, which Mr. Harrison had given me at our last meeting. "Do not open this until you need it," he had said, "but keep it somewhere safe and private." Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "I am sorry about dinner. Robert just wants to teach you responsibility. Maybe try to work with him to keep the peace." I did not reply. Instead, I spent the night reviewing the documents. While I understood some of it, many of the legal terms were beyond me. First thing in the morning, I called Mr. Harrison's office and was relieved when he agreed to see me immediately. His secretary showed me in without delay. Mr. Harrison looked concerned as I explained what had happened. "I suspected this might come," he said grimly. "Your stepfather has been making inquiries about the property and your father's estate for over a year now." "Can he legally charge me rent?" I asked. Mr. Harrison smiled for the first time. "Alan, I think it is time you understood exactly what your father arranged." He pulled out a thick folder and spread several documents across his desk. "This is the deed to your family home," he said, pointing to an official-looking paper. "And this is the trust agreement your father established before his death." As he explained, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. According to the documents, my father had placed the house in a specialized trust, while my mother had lifetime residency rights. Actual ownership of the house had transferred to me upon my 18th birthday yesterday. "Your father was remarkably prescient," Mr. Harrison said. "He structured things this way to ensure that if your mother ever remarried her new husband, could not gain control of the family home. The trust pays the property taxes and maintains a fund for major repairs. Your mother cannot be forced to leave regardless of her marital status, but the house belongs to you, Alan." "Does my mom know this?" I asked, stunned. "She knows the general arrangement, but perhaps not all the details." "Your father did not want to burden her with complex legal matters during her grief. And frankly, this information was to be shared with you when you turned 18, which was yesterday. And Robert, does he know if he does it is not because anyone from this office informed him. Based on his behavior, I suspect he believes the house either belongs to your mother outright or is still tied up in your father's estate." My mind was racing. "So, legally, he cannot charge me rent for living in my own house." Mr. Harrison's expression turned serious. "Not only that, Alan, but technically you could charge him rent for living in your house, though I would advise careful consideration before taking such an action." He then showed me statements for the trust that maintained the house and for my education fund. There were also investment accounts that had been growing steadily since my father's death. I was not wealthy by any means, but I was far more financially secure than I had realized. "Your father wanted you to have the tools to be independent and to protect yourself and your mother if necessary, Mr. Harrison explained. "The question now is, what do you want to do with this information?" We spent the next hour discussing options. Mr. Harrison advised against immediate confrontation, suggesting instead that I take time to document Robert's behavior and consult with my mother privately. He also recommended I speak with my mother's sister, my Aunt Jennifer, who had never seemed fond of Robert. I left his office with copies of all relevant documents and a growing sense of resolve. The powerlessness I had felt the night before was replaced by determination. Robert had been taking advantage of our grief and manipulating my mother for years. It was time to reclaim our home and our lives. Over the next week, I became a silent observer in my own home. With new awareness, I noticed patterns in Robert's behavior I had previously attributed to mere unpleasantness. He regularly checked my mom's phone when she left it unattended. He opened mail addressed to her. He made belittling comments disguised as jokes whenever she expressed an opinion different from his. I started recording some of our interactions on my phone, especially when Robert repeated his demands about rent or made disparaging comments about my entitlement. In one particularly telling recording, he suggested I should sign some paperwork just updating the homeowner's insurance that he had been meaning to get around to. I also reached out to my Aunt Jennifer, my mom's younger sister, who lived about an hour away. Once close, she had visited less frequently since Robert entered our lives. We met for lunch at a diner halfway between our homes. "I have been worried about Sarah for years," she confessed after I explained my concerns. "Robert has isolated her from friends and family so gradually she barely noticed. She stopped coming to family events because Robert always had some excuse. When I visit, he hovers and answers questions directed at her." She looked down at her coffee. "I tried to talk to her about it once and she got defensive, said I was jealous of her happiness. We did not speak for months after that. I decided it was better to maintain some contact than none at all." Jennifer confirmed what I had suspected. Robert had been systematically isolating my mother while creating financial dependence. "He convinced her to put her teaching salary into a joint account he controls," she explained. "He gives her an allowance for household expenses and questions every purchase." Before we parted, Jennifer hugged me tightly. Your father would be so proud of the young man you have become, Alan, and he would want you to protect yourself and your mom. Armed with this knowledge, I contacted a few more people. My mom's longtime friend and fellow teacher, Barbara, shared similar concerns. My dad's former business partner mentioned that Robert had approached him shortly after the wedding, asking detailed questions about my father's assets and seeming disappointed by the answers. Throughout this investigation, I maintained a calm, non-confrontational demeanor at home. I told Robert I was considering his rent proposal and would have an answer soon. He seemed pleased by my apparent compliance, even patting my shoulder condescendingly. Meanwhile, I learned that Robert had been pressuring my mom to convince me to sign some paperwork, supposedly for insurance purposes, but actually designed to give him claims on the property. My mother, caught between her husband's demands and her instinct to protect me, had been stalling, making excuses about my busy schedule. With Mr. Harrison's help, I prepared several documents of my own. We decided on a direct but non-aggressive approach. There would be no value in matching Robert's manipulative behavior with manipulation of my own. Exactly 2 weeks after my birthday, I asked my mom and Robert to join me for a family meeting after dinner. Robert looked smug, clearly assuming I was going to agree to his rent demands. My mom appeared nervous, fidgeting with her napkin. I have given a lot of thought to our discussion about my adult responsibilities. I began keeping my tone respectful but firm, and I agree that as an adult I should take a more active role in household matters. Robert nodded approvingly. Glad to see you are being reasonable. So you will have the first payment ready by June 1st. Actually, I said, placing a folder on the table, I would like to discuss the household arrangements more broadly. I opened the folder and carefully laid out the property records deed and trust documents. These are the official property records for this house. As you can see, the house was placed in a trust by my father before his death. As of my 18th birthday, I am the legal owner of this property. The color drained from Robert's face as he snatched up the documents, scanning them with increasingly frantic movements. My mother looked confused but not entirely surprised. "This is ridiculous," Robert spluttered. "These must be fake." "Sarah, did you know about this?" My mom hesitated before answering quietly. "I knew the house was protected in a trust for Alan. David wanted to make sure we always had a home no matter what." Robert's face contorted with anger. "And you never thought to mention this to me? Your husband." I intervened before he could continue berating her. "The trust also covers property taxes and major maintenance costs. It was structured this way to ensure long-term security for our family." "Our family," Robert repeated bitterly. "So what are you saying? You are going to throw us out? Your own mother?" "Not at all," I replied calmly. "Mom has lifetime residency rights. She cannot be forced to leave under any circumstances. And as her husband, you are welcome to continue living here as well under certain conditions." I outlined the new household arrangement I had developed with Mr. Sulland. Harrison's guidance, Robert could remain in the home as my mother's husband, but financial transparency would be required. My mother would open her own bank account for her salary. Household expenses would be shared proportionally based on income. And, most importantly, all financial decisions regarding the house would now include me. Alternatively, I concluded you are free to find other accommodation if these terms do not suit you. I would ask that you make this decision within the next 48 hours. Robert stormed out of the house, the front door slamming behind him. In the silence that followed, my mother began to cry. "I am so sorry, Alan," she sobbed. "I should have protected you better." "It is okay, Mom," I said, moving to sit beside her. "You were grieving, and he took advantage of that." Over the next several hours, my mother revealed the full extent of Robert's manipulation. He had convinced her that without his financial management, she would lose everything. He had isolated her from friends and family through subtle criticism and scheduling conflicts. He had made her believe she was financially incompetent, despite her having managed the household books successfully for years before he arrived. "I was so afraid of being alone," she confessed. "Of failing you. Robert seemed so capable, so sure of himself." By the time I realized what was happening, I felt trapped. I assured her that we would face whatever came next together the way Dad would have wanted. For the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of my mother's former strength returning to her eyes. The aftermath unfolded more dramatically than I had anticipated. Robert returned the next day, cycling through a range of tactics. First came rage with accusations of conspiracy and threats of legal action. When Mr. Taus, Harrison calmly explained the ironclad nature of the trust, Robert switched to manipulation, claiming he had only been trying to teach me responsibility and prepare me for the real world. When that failed, he attempted to appeal to my mother, directly professing his deep love for her and suggesting I was trying to come between them. Finally, he tried financial intimidation, claiming my mother would never manage without his guidance. Through it all, my mother remained steadfast, bolstered by renewed contact with her sister Jennifer and her friend Barbara, who had rallied to support her. After a week of failed attempts to regain control, Robert finally accepted that his position was untenable. He moved out 3 weeks later, taking only his personal belongings. The divorce proceedings were relatively straightforward, as the prenuptial agreement my mother had signed with my father's attorney's guidance protected her assets and income. Robert's attempts to claim a portion of the house value were quickly dismissed by the court. With Robert gone, our home gradually became a place of peace again. My mother started therapy to process the subtle emotional abuse she had endured. She reconnected with friends and family, rediscovering her own interests and voice. I decided to attend the state university just 30 minutes away, allowing me to live at home and support my mother through this transition, while pursuing my degree in architectural engineering, a field my father would have appreciated. 6 months after Robert's departure, we renovated the house, erasing the changes he had made and creating spaces that reflected our tastes and needs. My mother converted the formal dining room, which Robert had insisted we maintain despite never using it, into a bright art studio, where she began painting again, a hobby she had abandoned during her marriage. A year later, she started dating again cautiously. The man she met through her book club was a widower who treated her with genuine respect and made no claims on her independence. The first time I heard her laugh freely with him, I knew we had truly recovered from Robert's influence. As for me, I secured a summer internship with my father's former business partner, gaining practical experience in property development while completing my studies. Managing the family home and its associated trust taught me valuable lessons about financial responsibility, far more effective than Robert's demanded rent would have been. Perhaps the most profound lesson from this experience was not about property ownership or legal rights, but about recognizing manipulation and standing up against it appropriately. I could have responded to Robert's bullying with immediate anger, or matched his manipulation with my own. Instead, the measured fact-based approach recommended by Mr. Harrison proved far more effective and preserved my own integrity. I often think about my father's foresight and how his careful planning protected us even years after his death. His legacy was not just financial security, but also an example of how to care for those you love in thoughtful, meaningful ways. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to take advantage of you? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story about patience and strategic timing resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences. Do not forget to share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the best response to unfairness is not an immediate reaction, but careful preparation. Thank you for listening. And remember, the most valuable inheritance is not always measured in dollars, but in the wisdom passed from one generation to the next.